BDSM and non-standard relationships,
power exchange and polyamory,
sacred sexuality and fetishes, as well as simply fun kink.
You're listening to the Erotic Awakening Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next installment of the Femme Domme Mystique, a podcast that centers around feminine dominance in all of its aspects, not just femme, not just butch, but in all of it. I wanted to reintroduce myself. I am Mistress Simone, and I am your hostess for this podcast, and I am pleased that you have considered taking the time out of your busy day and joining me in regards to this wonderful topic. For those of you that have listened to the first one, thank you very much for the support. I greatly appreciate it. It has been so well received that I am very excited to be launching this. And the support that I have gotten from all aspects of the community has been wonderful. So I want to say thank you, everyone, for the support. And hopefully I will live up to the positive feedback that we have gotten so far for this podcast. I am looking forward to engaging in the topics that you have all suggested to me for future podcasts, and as well as some wonderful guests that we have coming up, some surprise guests. I'm not going to give some hints because I'm, a sadist as well as dominant, and I just love to screw with people. But some wonderful fellow mistresses, some wonderful femdom authors, and that's all the hints you're getting, people. Anyway, so the second podcast in this series, I would like to clarify some things from last week, that being my first podcast and trying to introduce myself to you and get you to know a little bit about who your hostess was, I made some faux pas with my dates. So a husband reviewed them, and upon looking back, I'd like to clarify some of those. So in regards to my leather history and my femdom history, I'm going to try and remember to correct these dates. I started as a professional dominatrix in 1993. So that would put me at just over 21 years in this profession, which I have been blessed with for my entire adult life. In regards to my personal play, I have always been kinky, and I believe, as I mentioned in the first podcast, if I didn't, I'm going to hear, that I've been kinky since I was 15, actually probably 8, when I actually tied up my Ken doll and made Barbie do all kinds of nasty things to him. Needless to say, I wasn't very popular with the mothers of the other girls and boys in the neighborhood. But, so 1993 was when I started as a professional dominatrix. In 1998, I moved from Taboo, which was a fetish store in Chicago, to the Leather Rose, which was at that time a sole proprietorship owned by a gentleman from Amsterdam named Hans. And we worked together for quite a few years, and there's a long Leather Rose history, which will probably be the aspect of another podcast. But in 1998, I took that over and was blessed to become much more active in the community. 2004 is when I ran for, competed, and won my international puppy handler contest. And 2009 is when I ran and captured the International Miss Olympus title. I believe that's most of the clarifications on the date. I swear I am not good at dates. Husband is much better at that, so if they're off by a few, you'll pardon me. But that does give you a little bit of clarification about how long this old lady's been around. So, moving beyond that, the topic of this podcast is something that came up while I was out with my family my sissy, one of my boys, and my husband after the Club Femme party last week. And we were having breakfast at a wonderful diner in Chicago, and the topic of attitude came up. And all three of the boys started complaining about bitchiness and how they have encountered it in their search for a mistress or a femdom, and how it's a big turnoff. So this concept was one I wanted to pick their brains about, and I'm going to put it out there for you, my podcast listeners, to also comment on after I discuss this concept with you. So bitchiness. What exactly is bitchiness, and what does it have to do with being a femdom? Well, in my opinion, not much. However, I want to clarify that to start, because it is a style and it is an attitude, and it is one that some ladies, both professional and lifestyle that I do know, adopt, and it works very well for them. However, it does not work well for me. And as we go on in this podcast, I hope to clarify the difference between bitchiness as an attitude and a positive attitude that works in this dynamic, and one that does not work in this dynamic or in life in general. So let's see what Webster has to say about bitchiness to start. So, according to Merriam-Webster, a bitch, besides being a female canine animal, the offensive slang term for it is a spiteful or overbearing woman. Something very unpleasant or difficult. Now, overbearing can go along with feminine dominance. And before I go any further, I want to say that the best thing a woman or a dominant, even male, can do is find their own style. There is no right way. There is no wrong way. This isn't the 1-2 way. Everybody is unique. And what turns you on and gets you off, as long as it is risk-aware consensual kink and everybody's agreed, go for it. So if super bitch is what you want and what you feel like you are, go for it. However, there's a big difference between that type of attitude and just being a general bitch. We all run across people during our day that we go, wow, she was such a freaking bitch. She must have really woke up on the wrong side, or he was a jerk. And those are people that you really, the negative energy coming off of them, you really don't want to hang around with. And for me as a femdom, that kind of energy does not work really well for my relationships. I am much more of what I call an old-fashioned on-hand dom. I don't really do the humiliatrix. I don't really do the verbal humiliation. I'm not a cam dom. I'm not a phone dom. I like to do things to people. I like to tie you up and do cock and ball torture on you. I like to flog you. I like to put you in heavy bondage. I like to tickle you. I like to get into your head and make you react. Bitchiness does not really work with my skill set and my personality. But while I was talking to these boys, it came across that if they approached a woman and there was a negative energy coming off of her immediately, very unapproachable, that it was very affront and they didn't want to talk to her anymore. And that's fine. Some people do that because they don't want the person who's coming to them to communicate with them. But what is bitchiness? When ladies come to me and say, I would love to have you train me as a dom. I would love to have me help you in this lifestyle. Can you train me to be a professional dom, or can you train me to be a mistress? Can you mentor me? And I have given classes in female dominance intensives, as my friends Eve Minex and Cleo Dubois have, which if you're in California, I highly recommend going to their classes. They're wonderful. And pretty much the first thing I say when I start this class is, being a mistress, engage in your feminine energy in a dominant way, is not synonymous, is not the same as being a bitch. Bitch does not mean dominant. And a lot of young ladies, when they come into this lifestyle, feel that the bitchier they are, that the more dominant they are. Well, you do not need to engage that energy if you do not want to. We've all seen the porn movies or the TV shows where the super bitch is the super strong woman. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. You can find your own style. And so I asked the boys what really turned them off when they encountered a lady or a female that had this bitchy attitude. And one of them said something that I found very profound. And it was my boy Ren. And he said that being bitchy does not show strength of character, but it shows lack of character and weakness of character and makes people look negatively upon you. And I thought about that for a minute. And I think that he has a good point in the fact that does being bitchy show an actual lack of character? Well, no, we don't know. That person could be having a bad day. They could have woke up on the wrong side. They could have had a death in the family, an illness of the family. So we don't know. But if you are constantly being bitchy when people try to extend a hand to you and you react that way on a regular basis, I can see how that would be considered a lack of character. And people wouldn't want to approach you. The other thing that was discussed, which I thought was very interesting, was that domineering is not the same as dominance. I have quite a few in my stable. And I like to micromanage to a certain extent. You know, if you have to go to the bathroom and you don't get an answer from me, go pee. All right? But I love life control. It is one thing that I get off on. I love the whole scene in The Secretary where he tells her how many peas to eat and then he can eat ice cream. Gets me off. I love sleep schedules, orgasm schedules, food schedules, beverage schedules, alcohol. You name it, I enjoy doing that. However, there's a very fine line between dominating that aspect of my slave's life and being an overbearing, domineering bitch. You want to engage your submissives so that they are growing in the relationship with you and that you are growing in the relationship and you're both getting what you need out of this power exchange. And if you are overbearing and domineering and they can't move 2 feet away from you at any times without permission, now let me say context, leather events, my boys stay by my side. But being overbearing and domineering in this style on a constant basis is very draining. It's very draining for you. It's very draining for the submissive. So temperance is a good thing. Be dominant. Take charge. Take control. But not overbearing, not domineering, not extreme controlling. There are times for that. You know, one of my slaves comes to see me and we do the total immersion thing. For the days that he's with me, everything is by the book. I am high protocol, which means that I like all my controls. I like all my mannerisms. He doesn't go to the bathroom without my permission. He doesn't go anywhere without my permission. And that is great because it gives him the control and the break from his busy life that he needs and the control that he desires. But that's not a constant thing. Just imagine if you were doing that 24/7, how draining that is. Many people have a fantasy about what 24/7 is, and actually 24/7 is very hard to maintain. I'd like to dispel the images right away from the slave living in the cage, gagged and bound, and feeder hood, feeder tubes, and coming out only when they need to. 24/7 is about getting your bills paid and cleaning your house and taking the car into the shop, and it's a give and exchange. That's why it's called 24/7 power exchange. But I'm getting off topic. That's for a future podcast. So when I tell the ladies that bitch does not equal dom, I often get this, oh, what if that's my style? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, slow down a little bit. It is fine to be bitch. And trust me, my boys get off when I am super bitch and I come at them full bitch mode. But you want them to be able to talk to you. And after scene and after play, or when there's a downtime, if they have a problem to communicate, if one of your girls comes to you or one of your boys comes to you and says, ma'am, mistress, I have a problem, and you're just like, I don't want to hear any problems, you're a slave, you don't have problems. Well, human first, people. Human first. Then submissive. Then dominant. And the people have to be able to talk to you, and you have to have an open communication for the power exchange to work. And if you are super bitch all the time and unapproachable, you're not going to engage them in their soul and their heart. And that's really where the bond comes from as DS. And we will be discussing non-DS aspects. We will be discussing just play mistresses and short-term mistresses and switches. But for this context, this show, we're going with bitchiness, and we're using it as communication and relationships and how it affects that. So, bitch does not equal dom. Temper yourself and figure out where it works for you and where it doesn't work for you. One of the boys did say another thing which I thought was interesting. And they thought that bitchiness showed insecurity. That people who have that bravado attitude, whether it's males or females or trans, that if you have that bitchy assholiness, bravado attitude all the time, it's because you're insecure. And I can see that connection. It's kind of like the I am an alpha. Well, if you say you're an alpha, you're not an alpha. Right? I can understand that. So when you're insecure, people tend to revert to bitchiness because it's comfortable for them and it's what they know how to do. And it puts up a wall between themselves and others. I would love to hear some concepts from my listeners about bitchiness. I would love to have you email me and give me your thoughts on it. It was clear from the conversation with the boys, and all of them are different. One is more of a leather fetish boy. One is my sissy Brenna. And one is my husband, who is mostly dominant, bottoms to me, and he identifies as a switch. And all three of them, completely different personas, yet they all have the same concept of, well, yeah, if she's a bitch, I don't want to deal with her. I don't want to talk to her. It makes things difficult. And I said, okay, so what's the solution? How do you solve this? And Ren came up with a very good quote, which feel free to take and use. And he said, a dominant, whether female, male, or trans, wants to inspire, not subjugate. You want the person who is in service to you to be afraid of you, but to be afraid of you in the right context. You want them to inspire you to do service because you want to please your dominant, not because you're afraid of punishment. Even though there may be punishment involved if you make a mistake, and punishment is a concept of this dynamic, which we will discuss at a later date, but you want them to look up to you and see your strength, not recoil from your abrasiveness. And I thought that was a very good way to explain the difference of how bitchiness does not work in long-term connections, but in short-term scenarios. As a mistress, I don't want my submissives to be afraid of me all the time. If they have an issue, they need to be able to come and talk to me. If they are not happy in service, if they want something. If you guys will recall back the first podcast, the concept I had where I talked to you about a little bit about my puppy Fifi and her coming to me and mentioning she wanted to run for that title, and how I heard the conversation between her and my first husband about, no, I don't want to talk to her. No, I don't want to talk to her. Well, but then she eventually did, and my reaction to it was positive. Positive reinforcement is an excellent way to engage and inspire your submissives. Negative bitchiness and negative feedback in communication and tearing someone down is great in scene context, but you don't want to do that at a constant basis because then it becomes abusive. And again, I welcome all kinds of feedback. I would love to hear from you guys. I do disagree with them in the context that reverting to bitchiness because people are insecure, or reverting to jerkness. I mean, what is the male trans equivalent of bitchiness? Is it just everybody's bitchy? Some people, that's just the way they look at life. That's the concept of their personality. I don't necessarily agree that type of attitude is inherently linked to insecure. I think there may be occasions where it is a connection and people put that bravado up because they're uncomfortable and they don't know how to react in a situation. Or it's expected of them. So let me tell you a little bit of a story. We had a Club Femme, which, if you're not familiar with Club Femme and you're interested in female dominance, do look up Club Femme International. It is run by a dear friend of mine, Ella Strickland, and the Chicago branch is the oldest branch. We've been going for 10 years now. Shameless plug. But at one of the parties, there was a brand new female dominant. And this was her first event. And she was just getting into the lifestyle. And she came in, and my sissy Brenna introduced her to me. And immediately she had this air of superiority, this air of bitchiness. And I was like, well, welcome to the studio. We're glad you're here. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. Or feel free to ask one of my stable or any of the fellow ladies. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here. And immediately, I, as another mistress, female dominant, was pushed back because there wasn't any welcoming energy. I'm like, all right, that's fine. That's her style. I respect that. I respect everyone's chosen style as long as it's not abusive in this lifestyle, because this is what about this lifestyle I like, is that we are all unique. And if you want to dress up in a clown suit and tie balloons to your submissive and then have her run around and pop them, I have a friend who does that. That's great. I love watching it. But anyway, so she stayed and she made the circuit, talked to a few people, talked to my Brenna, talked to Ren, talked to other ladies. And every person who came back to me didn't quite understand what was going on with her because of her attitude. Now remember, this is her first event. She's never been anywhere else. Brenna would come up to me and say, ma'am, I said, she just doesn't seem to be very friendly. She doesn't want to really talk. Okay. Another female dom would come up and go, what's with the new girl? Okay. If you are trying to engage others in your dynamic, whatever your dynamic is, and you immediately come off with an attitude, it is going to push people away from you. I'm not saying don't be a bitch, because I've seen some wonderful mistresses do great bitchy scenes. But if you are in a social setting or a relationship setting, and the idea is to communicate with people, pulling the bitch energy, the bitch card out way too early and way too soon can be a detriment and push people back and away from you. Okay? I have had ladies come up to me and say, well, I don't know why the submissives will not come up and talk to me. And we've had to have conversations about how you need to make yourself a little bit more approachable. And I know that kind of sounds weird. I'm the mistress. I shouldn't have to make myself more approachable. But it is. It's in the energetic signature that you push out. And if you are pushing out negativity and crankiness and this air of superiority constantly, you may be keeping your ideal submissive away from you, because he or she is too scared to approach you. There may be a perfect submissive out there for you, but because you are not open to that communication, they're not going to come and talk to you. Bitchiness. A great tool, a great attitude, but not an ideal way to be 24/7. These are my thoughts on bitchiness. I hope you enjoyed it. I do welcome feedback. Please email me at chicagomistress@gmail.com or find me on Twitter, Chicago Mistress, or FetLife, Mistress_Simone. I am sure we will go back to this topic of bitchiness again, but I did want to touch on it because it came up in conversation and I felt it was a good topic. Some of the future topics that we have coming up will be high protocol, proper mannerisms for submissives, types of dominance, what happens when you're not a femme, and I will be having guests. I already hinted at that, and I hope you will keep thinking about who those guests could be. I'm sure that you will look forward to them. Anyway, this is Mistress Simone for Femme Domme Mystique. I appreciate you sharing this time with me, and I hope that the topic we covered today was of some interest to you. Next week, we are going to discuss pushy bottoms. Please join me next week. Signing off, Femme Domme Mystique.